Good morning, welcome to Board Game Barrister, our local game shop in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I'm Andy, and I'm here with Theo, Renee, Glenn, and Gordon, and today we're talking Doomlings, a game where the world is ending, and it's up to us to try to create the most dominant species of Doomlings that can survive it in the end. Let's get into it. Welcome to Doomlings, a crazy little card game about the end of the world. All the cards you see here and everything you need to play come in the Doomlings game box, but the playmat is a little bit of an extra we've got. That does not come in the box. To get your game started, you're going to grab all your age cards, and you're going to divide those between the ones that say Catastrophe at the top and the ones that don't. The non-catastrophes are your ages, and you're going to grab 9 of those for your game. Separately, you're going to grab 3 catastrophes. And then we're going to create our ages deck by creating 3 separate piles, each with 3 ages and 1 catastrophe. Shuffle each of those piles, and then stack them on top of each other, and that is your completed ages deck with 3 catastrophes hidden among all those ages. To prep your traits deck, all you do is shuffle it, and then we've got our traits ready to go. Everybody at the table is going to grab one of these gene pool tracker cards here, and you'll set your starting gene pool to 5 by orienting the numeral 5 away from yourself toward the center of the table. Then everybody draws 5 cards off the top of their deck to be their starting hand. The cards in your hand are known only to yourself unless a card effect states otherwise. And we'll finish setting the game by placing this Birth of Life card down in the center of the table to represent the first age of our 3 ages in our game of Doomlings. So Doomlings is a game about trying to collect and play as many strong traits as possible into your personal trait area. Most of those traits will create cool ways for you to score points or interfere with other people's points. And we're going to do this over the course of 3 eras. Each era will end in one of those catastrophe cards that we put in our ages deck, which means we'll move on to the next era. At the end of the 3rd era, when we find our final catastrophe, the world ends. And so does the game. And so to begin the game, the player to the left of our dealer will take their first turn, and a turn is simple. You're going to play 1 trait card, and then you're going to stabilize your hand. Sometimes your turn will be affected by static effects that come off of the current age card, but since we're beginning with the Birth of Life, everything is normal to begin the game. All you do is play 1 trait on your turn. So if our turn was first, we'd look at the 5 cards in our hand, pick one we wanted to play, and unless there's some sort of stated restriction as to when you're allowed to play a card, you can just choose any card in your hand and you can play it down into your trait area. So if I choose this Mitochondrion, I put it down in my trait area, and it comes with a static ability that permanently increases my gene pool. It's also worth 1 point. And anytime a card has an effect on your gene pool, you're going to represent that effect immediately by augmenting or decrementing your gene pool card. So our gene pool is now 6. There's no additional text to carry out on our traits, so we move on to stabilizing at the end of our turn. Stabilizing means getting your current hand number to your gene pool number. So if you have fewer cards than that number, you're going to draw cards from the top of the traits deck. If you have more cards than your gene pool number, you're going to discard cards to our discard pile. And if you're already at your gene pool number, then perfect, you're already stabilized. We're at 4 cards, which means we need 2 more to get to our gene pool number. We're going to stabilize by drawing 2 cards. And then we'd be on to the next player. So let's talk about some of the other types of traits you're going to see as you play. The first is going to be traits with the little action symbol down at the bottom. When you play a card with an action symbol, you're then going to resolve the text on that card once and only once as you're playing it. So in the case of Costly Signaling, I would immediately return an opponent's trait back into their hand, and then I get to play another trait myself. And if I happen to play another trait with another action, I would use that action immediately as well. Traits with this tiny symbol in the corner mean they can score you bonus points at the end of the game based on the text on that card. Some cards will have a tiny exclamation point with wings, which means that you can play this card anytime you want to, even if it's not your turn. And then this tiny symbol at the bottom of some cards means that the text on that card is going to be carried out at the very end of the game. This one has you make a decision at the end that can affect scoring of yourself and other players. You'll also notice that this card has a star in the corner, some extra yellow elements around the border, and says Dominant up at the top. Dominant is the last type of trait we're going to talk about. A small number of the cards in the deck are dominant traits, which are very strong and have very powerful effects. The trick with dominant traits is that you're only allowed to play a total of 2 of them max over the course of the game, so you're going to want to carefully choose which and when to play those dominant traits. Once every player at the table's had a chance to take their turn in clockwise order, that means it's the end of the current age. Our first player is then going to keep us going by drawing the next card in the Ages deck and placing it on top of that Birth of Life card. Our new Prosperity Age says that for this entire round, at the end of each of your turns, you may choose not to stabilize. And we'll go around the table with that age effect in mind, and then move on to the next age from there. Now eventually, as we're going around playing 1 trait each and then drawing the next age card, we are going to inevitably find ourselves in a catastrophe. Our first catastrophe for this game is the Ice Age. Every catastrophe card has the effect of decreasing everybody at the table's gene pool by 1, so we're going to do that immediately as soon as we've drawn this card. The Ice Age has the added effect of making everybody at the table discard a card from their hand for every single red trait they have in their trait area. So if I had 2 red traits out in front of me, I would lose 2 cards from my hand right now. And last, every catastrophe has a World's End effect. Just like it sounds, this is an effect that takes place at the end of the entire world, meaning the end of the game, and we're actually only going to resolve the World's End effect for the 3rd and final catastrophe that we find. So for the moment, we're going to ignore this World's End text. Catastrophes have the added effect of ending the current era of the game, which means we're going to move on to the next era. At the beginning of a new era, the first player is going to move to the left of the person who had previously been first player. So now the player to our left would be first player, and they'll start us off for this current time around the table with the catastrophe at the top of the deck. When we come back around to them, they will begin the new era by drawing a new age. We'll play through the entire second era exactly the same as the first and move into the third, and then during that third era, when the inevitable third catastrophe finds its way to the top of that stack, that means the game is about to end. We get no additional chance to react to this card appearing, we're just going to carry out the effects on the card as well as its additional World's End effect, and then the game will be over. The Solar Flare in this case says -1 to gene pools. Everybody discards half of their hand, rounded up, and its World End effect is that at the end of the game here, everybody will receive -1 point for every purple trait in their trait pile. And once the end of the game comes about, we're going to count up all the points in our trait pile, meaning all of the points listed in the bottom corner of our traits, as well as any additional trait abilities that'll score us additional points. Once we've scored everybody up, the player with the most points is our winner and the Doomling species that survives the apocalypse. Alrighty, for most of us it was our first time sitting down to Doomlings today. We played with 5 players. Theo's the only one who had played before and had played the game in about 20 minutes in a 2-player game, you said? 3 players, okay. Whereas we played with 5 players and it took us about an hour and 15 minutes. So this is really a game where depending on how focused you are, how much you want to think about your cards, and directly how many players are at the table, that's going to affect how long it takes you to play. We would say it could take you probably anywhere between 20 minutes and an hour and a half, depending on how many players you have and how much focus you're putting into it.
We were playing with the base game, no expansions. There are a number of expansions that you can add in to make your game longer or crazier if that's what you want to do. A nice thing about the game that they call out right in the rule book, and kudos to the rule book. It's really, it's well written and it's fun to read. And they'll give you 2 pieces of advice. The first one I reread to myself as we played, which is don't take it too seriously, don't think too much about it, and we still kind of did. But the other is that if there are cards that you don't like, just remove them. And I think generally this is a game that you will customize to what you like. You know, you will add in a house rule. If you want to play with more dominant traits, play with more dominant traits. If you want to play with I don't like the cards in my hand, discard, draw more cards, you could probably do that. The game is flexible enough in terms of what you are doing, it's low stakes enough in terms of what you're doing, that you will find rules that you like. My advice with anything where you're house ruling a whole bunch is make certain that everybody knows what those changes are up front. But I think this really lets you craft the game to the experience that your friends and family want to have.
Opponents reveal 1 card in their hand to all players. I steal 1 and play it immediately.
Oh. I have a kidney. Its value is equal to the number of kidneys in your trait pile.
You know, I also have a kidney.
Well, I'm not playing kidney anymore. Here we go.
For me, Doomlings is all about funny discovery, I think is the best way to put it. They've created so many different traits on these cards, and even the ages to an extent have a funny element to each of them and stuff like that. But the traits are where it shines, and there are some traits that by their very token repeat, like the kidneys and some of the other ones that depend on having more of that same trait, like swarms and stuff like that. But for the most part, most of the traits were unique. If somebody had a trait in front of them, you weren't going to see it in front of anybody else at the table. So I would highly suggest doing what we did and reading the flavor text on every single card as they're being played, because that's where a lot of the work and love in this game went into.
The puns are the best. Mm-hmm. It was very appealing to me.
Ba-dum-bum.
I will also say I like the number of cards that cause player interaction. It's very easy to have a game like this where it's just simply I'm just going to work on my best score possible and everything anyone else does doesn't matter at all. And in this game it's like this lets me steal a card from anyone. This one lets me look at someone's hand and play card. Like there's so many cards that let you do things or steal cards or move cards around. It's not just me playing a solo game next to a person playing a solo game next to someone else playing a solo game.
And sometimes the choice is taken away from you because, like, for example, with the first catastrophe there, we had to pass our hands to the right, and then we had to learn all of the new cards that were in our hands. We're like, oh, now I don't have the chance to play sneaky because I no longer have that card.
I was going to say, I do like the way the catastrophes sort of mix things up and change it. I came in second to last, Which would not have been the case if Renee had not picked the right catastrophe to play, because
Yeah.
I would have had much more points.
Yeah, the catastrophes and ages break it up nicely. Even each new age changing the rule on you for one turn, like, would either be like, oh yeah, that's really nice, or at certain times we're like, wow, it shut down exactly what I was going to try to do, and now I got to come up with a new plan. Cold Blood, you may draw 3 cards and play one now.
Oh, I'm going to play
Oh, so you need to-
Kataba Buff's Fees.
Wait, what happened?
Prevent an action. Why? Why? Nothing happens.
All right.
Oh, but I'm actually going to play Parasitic and steal that action. It still stops its trait, or doesn't do its action, so I can. And if I have another purple, I can play it.
But you get to stabilize.
Boy, was that fun. You got a note going into this one. Your strategy might get messed up by the cards on the table, by the cards in other people's hands, and you might be trying to build something and it's just going to come crumbling down. You might end up coming in last like I did, and it's going to be kind of up to you to choose to just see the game for what it is, which is a fun, goofy time. Obviously, it won't be for everyone, and if that doesn't sound fun to you, great. There's a million other games out there, but if you want a good time where you get to kind of steal some traits out from underneath other people and have a good time of it, this one was great.
And when the cards do line up in your favor and you do get to be heroic and have all the green, savor that and be happy when someone else gets it, because it's not going to happen every game,
Yeah.
right? It's not going to happen to you all the time for sure. It's not going to happen at all on some of the games, and it's going to be really cool when it does happen, and even cooler when it happens to you.
All right, I think that does it for Doomlings. Thank you for joining us. We had a fantastic time with this one, even me, despite all. And we hope you had fun watching. Thanks for joining us this time. Leave a like if you want to, comment if you got one. We love reading those, and subscribe if you want to see our new videos every single week when we post those. For the time being, we'll plan to see you next week, and thanks for this week.